All right, so let's dive into something that's like super important,
Yeah.
for anyone who relies on technology.
Hmm.
And let's be real,
Yeah.
that's all of us these days,
Not
right?
get much.
We're talking about the security of, those systems that we all depend on,
Right.
and specifically a concept called observability.
Okay.
Think of it as having a real-time, like a health check for your computer network,
I see.
like a dashboard showing you what's running smoothly and what might be, about to crash.
You need that visibility, especially with like all the complexity of these systems nowadays.
Yeah,
I mean, we can't just, blindly trust that everything is working as it should.
right. And to make that happen, a
Yeah.
lot of companies are using a tool called Prometheus, and it's become like incredibly popular
Yeah.
for monitoring everything from like websites to power grids.
Right.
But here's the part that's a little unsettling.
Okay.
A recent study found that 336,000 Prometheus servers were
Oh,
vulnerable to attack.
that's a lot.
That's not just a random number, by the way.
Right.
To put it in perspective, that represents a significant chunk of the internet's like essential infrastructure. The systems that keep our, our digital world running.
And what's really concerning is a lot of these vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
they weren't due to some, super complex zero-day exploit or anything.
Oh, really?
It was often just basic security oversights,
Oh, wow.
things that could have been prevented with some, just some fundamental precautions.
So it's almost like
Like-
leaving your front door wide open
Yes,
and then being surprised when someone walks in.
exactly.
Except in this case, it's not your house at risk.
Yeah.
It's potentially things like power grids
Oh,
or hospitals.
exactly. And the implications are huge.
Yeah.
We're talking about potential disruptions to critical services, sensitive data being exposed,
Right.
even entire systems being hijacked.
Okay, before we get into the specifics of what can go wrong,
Yeah.
let's rewind a bit. How are these security gaps even discovered in the first place?
Well, it was actually through the work of cybersecurity researchers.
Oh,
They were essentially doing what's called ethical hacking.
ethical hacking.
Yeah, so they were probing systems for weaknesses,
Okay.
but with the goal of, responsibly disclosing those vulnerabilities so they could be fixed.
So it's like having a team of like white hat hackers
Yeah,
constantly testing our defenses to find the weak spots before the bad guys do.
exactly.
Okay.
And what they found with Prometheus was pretty alarming.
Oh.
A lot of these servers were essentially sitting out there on the public internet,
Really?
completely exposed,
Wow.
like a car parked on a dark street with the keys in the ignition.
So what kind of damage could someone do if they were to like exploit these vulnerabilities?
Well, there are three main avenues of attack that were identified.
Okay.
The first is what's called the denial of service attack.
Denial of service.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty disruptive.
It is, imagine a website being flooded with so many requests that it just crashes.
Wow.
That's essentially what a denial of service attack does.
I see.
It overloads the server,
Right.
makes it unavailable to legitimate users.
Okay, so if someone wanted to take down a website they didn't like,
Yeah.
this would be one way to do it.
Right. And because these Prometheus servers are often used to monitor critical infrastructure,
Right.
a successful denial of service attack could have like real-world consequences,
Yeah.
disrupting things like power grids or communication networks.
That's a pretty scary thought.
Absolutely. And then there's the risk of information disclosure.
Okay.
It's like leaving your financial records out in the open for anyone to see.
Oh, wow.
Attackers could potentially gain access to sensitive data,
Hmm.
about the systems being monitored,
Right.
which could give them valuable information to plan further attacks.
So it's not just about disrupting services,
Correct.
it's also about potentially leaking confidential information that could be used for, malicious purposes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the third type of attack
Mhm.
is something called repo jacking.
Repo jacking.
Yeah. And this one is a little bit more technical.
Okay.
Are you familiar with how software updates typically work?
I have like a general idea.
Okay.
Download a patch or, a new version of the software to
Mhm.
keep things running smoothly
Right.
and fix any security holes.
So imagine someone being able to tamper with that update process,
Okay.
replacing the legitimate software with their own malicious code.
Oh, wow.
That's what repo jacking is all about.
Okay.
Hijacking the software supply chain.
So instead of getting a security update,
Yeah.
you're actually installing like a backdoor
Exactly.
that gives attackers control over your system.
That's the danger.
Wow.
And what makes repo jacking particularly tricky is it can be very difficult to detect.
Really?
You might think you're installing a legitimate update,
Right.
but you're actually being compromised.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about these 3 types of attacks: denial of service, information disclosure, and repo jacking.
Right.
But why should our listeners care about all this?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, unless they're running a massive data center.
Yeah.
It's not really their problem, is it?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Oh.
Remember how we talked about Prometheus being used to monitor critical infrastructure?
Right.
Well, if those systems are compromised,
Yeah.
it can have a ripple effect.
Okay.
That impacts everyone. Imagine a power grid going down because of a denial of service attack.
Wow.
Or sensitive medical data being leaked due to a security flaw.
So even if I'm not personally using Prometheus,
Right.
the security of those systems that are using it can directly impact my life.
Exactly.
I see.
It highlights how interconnected our digital world is.
Yeah.
And how a vulnerability in one area can have far-reaching consequences.
They're all connected.
It is, and it raises an important question about the overall state of cybersecurity. If companies are making these kinds of basic mistakes
Right.
with something as critical as Prometheus,
Yeah.
what other vulnerabilities are lurking out there?
Well, that's a pretty unsettling thought.
Yeah, it's just...
And the source material we're looking at today actually dives into this broader trend. The fact that we're seeing a lot of this happening in the context of the shift towards what's called cloud-native technology.
Cloud-native.
What does that even mean?
It's essentially a new way of building and running software.
Okay.
Think of it like this.
Yeah.
In the past, companies would have their own servers and data centers managing everything themselves.
Okay.
But now with the cloud, they're moving more and more of their operations to online services provided by companies like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft.
So it's like using online services instead of having everything stored on your own computer.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And while this offers a lot of benefits,
Yeah.
things like scalability, flexibility, and cost savings, it also introduces new complexities.
Oh, I see.
You're now relying on a third-party provider for your security.
Right. Wow.
And the way you build and deploy software has to change to take advantage of the cloud's unique capabilities.
And it sounds like that shift to cloud native is creating a bit of a gap.
It is.
Between innovation and security.
Unfortunately.
We're moving so fast to embrace the benefits of the cloud that sometimes we're not taking the time to properly secure these new systems.
That's a key insight. And the source we're looking at
actually
quotes an expert who put it this way.
Oh, really?
It's staggering how much infrastructure is left exposed on the public internet.
Wow.
Companies treat security as an afterthought rather than a foundational requirement. That really captures the essence of the problem, wouldn't you say?
It does. It's almost as if we're so excited about the shiny new possibilities of the cloud. Right.
But we're forgetting to lock the doors and windows.
And that's a dangerous oversight.
So what's the perspective from, like, the people on the front lines, the IT professionals who are dealing with these security challenges day in and day out?
From what I've seen, there's a mix of frustration and resignation.
I bet.
They're seeing these same basic mistakes being made over and over again.
Right.
And it feels like an uphill battle to convince companies to take security seriously.
Yeah, I bet it's got to be demoralizing to see these preventable problems leading to, major security breaches.
Absolutely. And the source material we have actually highlights some specific concerns that IT professionals have raised.
Oh, really?
For example, one commented that even if companies don't think they need more complicated network security measures, they should at least have a basic firewall in place.
Right. A firewall?
But it's like locking your front door.
Yeah.
It might not stop a determined attacker.
But it will deter the casual ones.
Makes sense. It's a simple step to make a big difference.
Right. And another IT professional pointed out that a lot of these repo jacking attacks are happening because companies aren't properly securing their software repositories.
Oh.
It's like leaving the keys in your car.
Right.
You're making it way too easy for someone to steal it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's a pattern we see repeated time and again.
Wow.
Simple security measures being overlooked.
Right.
Leading to potentially catastrophic consequences.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about, like, solutions.
Okay.
Let's say our listener is using Prometheus.
Right.
What are the most important steps they can take to protect themselves from these types of attacks?
Well, the first and most crucial step is to limit public access to your Prometheus server.
Okay.
It's kind of like locking your doors in Windows.
Right.
You want to make it as difficult as possible for unauthorized users to even reach your system. Tools like firewalls and access control lists can help you do this.
Access control lists.
Think of an access control list as a guest list for your server.
Okay.
Only letting in those who have a specific invitation.
So instead of having your server out there on the open internet for anyone to find, you're putting up some barriers to control who can get in. Makes sense.
Yeah.
What else can people do?
The next layer of protection is to implement strong authentication and encryption.
Okay.
This means using robust passwords.
Right.
And ensuring that all communication with the server is encrypted.
Okay.
Kind of like having a secret code that only authorized users know.
So it's like using HTTPS for websites, but for my entire server infrastructure.
Precisely.
Okay.
HTTPS ensures that the communication between your web browser and the website you're visiting is encrypted.
Right.
Protecting your data from being intercepted. The same principle applies to securing your server. You want to make sure that all data being transmitted is protected from prying eyes.
Okay, so we've got limited access and encryption in place.
Yeah.
What about that repo jacking issue we talked about earlier?
Right.
How can people protect themselves from having their software updates hijacked?
There are specialized tools available that can help monitor your software repositories for any suspicious activity.
I see.
Think of it like having a security camera for your software supply chain.
I see.
These tools can alert you if someone is trying to tamper with your updates.
Oh, wow.
Allowing you to catch a potential attack before any damage is done.
So it's like having a watchdog that's specifically trained to sniff out those kinds of threats.
Exactly. And along with these technical safeguards, it's crucial to regularly audit your server configuration.
Okay.
This involves checking for any misconfigurations or accidental openings that attackers could exploit.
Right, so it's like doing a routine security check of your house.
Yeah.
Making sure all the doors and windows are locked and there are no obvious vulnerabilities.
Exactly.
So it's not enough to just set things up securely in the beginning.
Right.
You need to be constantly vigilant.
Yeah, you got to keep an eye on things.
And make sure everything is still locked down.
Right. Security is not a one-time fix.
Okay.
It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Of monitoring, updating, and adapting to new threats.
And I'm guessing that this ongoing vigilance is even more important.
It is.
In the cloud-native world, where things are constantly changing and evolving.
Absolutely. The cloud offers incredible flexibility and scalability.
Right.
But it also introduces new security challenges that require a different approach to security management.
You know, this whole conversation has really highlighted how security is often treated as an afterthought.
Yeah.
Something that gets tacked on at the end.
It is.
Instead of being like baked into the design from the start, it's like building a house without any locks or alarms and then wondering why you get robbed.
That's a great analogy, and unfortunately, it's a mindset that we see far too often.
I bet.
Companies are so focused on getting their products and services to market quickly.
Right, gotta get it out there.
That they sometimes neglect the fundamental security practices that could prevent a major breach down the line.
And in the end, it's the users who suffer the consequences.
It is.
Whether it's having their personal data compromised, their services disrupted, or their trust in companies eroded. It's the users who bear the brunt of these security failures.
Exactly. So what can we do as users to like push for better security practices?
Is it just about being more careful with our own passwords?
Well, those are important individual steps, but there's a collective aspect to it as well. We as users have a voice, and we can use it to demand better security from the companies we interact with.
Right.
We can choose to do business with companies that prioritize security and hold those that are negligent accountable.
So it's about voting with our wallets.
Yeah.
And making it clear that security is something we value and expect.
Exactly. And that collective pressure can be a powerful force for change.
You know, we've been talking a lot about the specific vulnerabilities in Prometheus.
Right.
But this feels like a much bigger issue.
It is.
The systemic problem that goes beyond any single tool or technology.
It absolutely is. The Prometheus case is really just a symptom of a larger trend.
Yeah.
The fact that security is often lagging behind innovation.
Right, always trying to catch up.
We're so eager to embrace new technologies and push the boundaries of what's possible that we sometimes forget to ask the hard questions about security and privacy.
It's like we're building these amazing, powerful machines without thinking about the potential consequences if they malfunction or fall into the wrong hands.
And those consequences can be significant.
Right.
We're talking about potential disruptions to critical infrastructure.
Yep.
The erosion of trust in institutions and the loss of privacy on a massive scale.
Wow.
These are not just hypothetical problems.
Right.
They're real threats that we need to be taking seriously.
So what's the takeaway message for our listeners?
Yeah, good question.
What can they do to navigate this increasingly complex and risky digital landscape?
I think the most important thing is to be informed and engaged.
Okay.
The more we understand about the threats we face and the measures we can take to protect ourselves, the better equipped we'll be to make smart decisions.
Right.
And advocate for better security practices.
So it's about educating ourselves.
Yeah.
Taking proactive steps to secure our own systems and holding companies accountable for their security practices.
Exactly. It's a shared responsibility.
Right.
And we all have a role to play.
You know, as we were talking about all of this, I kept thinking back to that statistic we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
336,000 vulnerable Prometheus servers.
That's a big number.
That's a huge number. But it also makes me wonder, how many more are out there?
Right.
Hidden in the shadows, just waiting to be discovered.
That's a chilling thought, isn't it?
It is.
We've only scratched the surface of the problem.
Right.
And there are undoubtedly countless other vulnerabilities lurking out there.
Yeah.
Waiting to be exploited.
It feels like we're in a constant race, to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
But the reality is we might always be playing catch up.
That's the challenge with cybersecurity.
Yeah.
It's a constantly evolving landscape.
Right.
And there's no single silver bullet,
right.
that will solve all the problems.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we should just give up.
Right.
Or resign ourselves to being victims. There's a lot we can do.
Okay.
Both individually and collectively.
Right.
To make a difference.
So to wrap things up,
Yeah.
let's bring it back to our listeners.
Okay.
What are the key takeaways?
Yeah, what should they walk away with?
From our deep dive into, the world of Prometheus and all these security challenges.
I think the first and most important takeaway is that security is everyone's responsibility.
Everyone's responsibility.
Whether you're running a massive data center
Right.
or just using the internet to check your email,
Right.
you have a role to play in protecting yourself and the systems you rely on.
It's not just about leaving it to the IT experts to figure out.
Right.
We all have to be aware of the risks and take proactive steps to mitigate them.
Right. And that starts with understanding the basics of how these systems work and the types of threats that exist.
Right.
We've talked about some specific vulnerabilities in Prometheus.
Yeah.
But the principles apply more broadly.
Okay.
Things like limiting access.
Right.
Using strong passwords.
Yeah.
And keeping your software updated. Those are fundamental security practices that everyone should be following.
It's like locking your doors and windows. Even if you live in a safe neighborhood, it's just common sense.
Common sense, exactly.
And then there's the collective aspect of security.
Right.
We as users have a voice.
We do.
And we can use it to demand better security practices from the companies we interact with.
Exactly. We can choose to support businesses that prioritize security.
Okay.
And hold those that are negligent accountable.
So it's about being informed consumers.
Yeah.
Asking questions about how our data is being handled and making choices that align with our values.
Precisely. And we can also advocate for stronger security regulations and policies that help protect consumers and promote responsible innovation.
So it's about shaping the future of the internet and the digital world in a way that prioritizes security and privacy.
That's right. It's not just about preventing attacks. It's about building a more secure and trustworthy digital ecosystem.
Right. For everyone.
For everyone, exactly.
Well, that's a powerful message to end on.
It is.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the technical details of Prometheus vulnerabilities to the broader societal implications of cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
I hope our listeners have come away from this deep dive feeling a little more informed and empowered to take control of their own digital security.
I hope so too. Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
And in the world of cybersecurity, that's more true than ever.
So until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay secure.